So can you introduce yourself?
My name is Danielle Daughtry Sanford, and I am a nurse by profession, and I am your mom.
Oh.
One thing I noticed when I first moved here was all the for sale signs were white people. And not that they were rude. It was this part of the county. It was predominantly white, and as black people started to become professional, they wanted to, of course, be in a area where the schools were decent, and so they moved where they thought that their kids would have the best shot. So when that started to happen, the white people started to put up their for sale signs because they thought that the price value was going to decrease. So they basically moved out. With me being a public health nurse, I had to do a lot of visits. So that's when I really got to see parts of Atlanta that I really hadn't seen before. There was an area called the Perry Homes, which there was projects out there, but there was these housing in the back, and it was a street called Abner Terrace. And even though a lot of the people there were living there were low income, it was in transition, and the property was, it was like people weren't keeping it up. And then folks were initially, they were like, here, we'll just sell you this for whatever. Then the investors started come scooping in and doing what they do. Let me just have a look-see down here, because this was a horrible area.
Head northeast on Johnson Road Northwest toward Rochester Street Northwest. In 1,000 feet, turn right onto
my
Buffalo Lane.
gosh, they knocked down all these houses. Oh my goodness, none of this was here. There were houses all down this street. None of these houses was here.
A lot of the places we used to work, they knocked them down.
Oh my
600 feet, turn
gosh.
right onto Habershaw Drive Northwest. Take the next right onto Habershaw
Kiara,
Drive Northwest.
$500,000? These were like run down. The streets were so narrow. There's some areas on the south side of kind of near West End that are completely gentrifying. You go over there and you see yoga bars and people jogging up the street. And then the same thing happened at the Perry Homes. There's this horrible landfill. The kids would all get sick and forever complaining when the kids and the families were in the projects. The kids would get sick, and then they would go visit their grandparents out in the country, and they wouldn't have any asthma symptoms. Then they would come back to stay in the projects, and they would have horrible symptoms, get sick, skin rashes. Is this a park?
Yeah, it's a park.
Okay, it's a park. I'm gonna drive past where the projects were. This is crazy because this is good, but this is bad because the people that lived in the projects had been pushing for parks and things, and they never would build them. Think about that. Now these investors come in, scoop up the place, and clean the landfill, put new housing in there. All these people are moved out, and some of them were under the impression that they would be able to come back. Well, they weren't able to come back. And then they gentrified, and there's pretty much all white people out there. So those people were kind of living like that and stuff. That's where the landfill was. Right there. People jogging out here. You've got to be kidding. I can't believe that landfill caused so many kids to get sick. Those kids had to live in that stuff. Those kids had to live in that stuff. And it was a lot of them that lived like that.
Hello. This is Skylar from Layers of Atlanta.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, Skylar. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
Awesome.
I first came to Atlanta in the 1950s, so you can imagine there's a whole lot of change since then. For example, Midtown, when I first came here, was essentially, the biggest building was probably 3 or 4 stories. And 10th Street, the intersection of 10th Street and Peachtree was like a little neighborhood. There was a movie theater, a 5 and 10 cent store, a hardware store, and things like that. Now look at it. Well, in those days, Piedmont Park was a golf course basically.
Oh wow, I did not know
It was a
that.
park, but I mean, it was a golf course as well, and people played golf as well. In fact, in those days, there was a sandy beach, and you went swimming in the lake. Well, again, Buckhead was a lot like Midtown originally. I mean, again, small shops and stores. Tallest residential building might be 3 or 4 stories.
Yeah.
Buildings that were built a long time ago. I mean, let's say probably in some even 30s, 40s, or 50s. But it had not. It was still just a small neighborhood kind of area. Back when I first came here, the highway going through town was 2 lanes in each direction.
Wow.
Well, there was not much traffic, back then. And even when I came back after I got out of college in 1969, we lived in Brookhaven, which was 10 miles out.
Gotcha.
And that was a long commute back then. The Fox would be the probably my most favorite building. Because it's such an example of theaters, that were built back in the 30s and 40s and whatnot. It came very close to being torn down. When the Bell South Tower was built behind it, they originally were going to demolish it. It was basically abandoned. Although it was still it was a movie theater when I was here. And we used to go to movies there. There were no stage plays in those days. There was no little theater, none of that. So it was all movies. So the Bell South was simply going to tear the building down. And a movement started, to save it. And so that's why we, Save the Fox was the name of the movement, of course.
My name is John Adams, Adams.
All right.
I'm 61.
Thank you. And how long have you lived in Atlanta?
I mean, I was born here in 1960, but I haven't lived here the whole time. But, maybe 50 years.
Gotcha.
I'm 61. Well, I think the city has improved in many ways over the years. And I credit most of that to the influx of people from other places.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Fox Theater. Did you ever, go to the Fox Theater, before? Because I feel like the Fox is now, a very cool, historical, old building.
So my wife's piping in. She saw the Dead there in 86.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Before the Fox got into a crisis mode in the late 70s, I saw a few movies there. I missed the Big Stones concert in 76. But back then, the Fox was really trashed.
But, I mean, the paint was peeling.
Oh, the carpet was ripped up.
Drug addicts would kind of congregate.
It was really run down. And then it began to be renovated in the late 70s. And, the renovation went on for a long time, as you probably know, 20 years. It nearly got torn down. There's actually a great story about how it didn't get torn down. This woman who was a middle-aged woman, and I think she's an attorney, and she was in some downtown office building and walked by a conference room. I heard people talking about the demolition starting tomorrow. And when they left the conference room, she went inside and saw that it was 666 Peachtree. I think that's the address. And she wasn't sure what that was, but she went home and looked it up and saw it was the Fox. And saw that the demolition permit had been issued. It was going to be torn down the next morning.
Oh, wow.
So she told her son, who was in high school, and he got a bunch of buddies together, guys and gals, and they even had a dog with them. And they went down and got the night watchman to let them in. And they camped out in the Fox, and they were in there the next morning and wouldn't leave.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile, the mom started calling people with influence and knowledge and whatnot and kind of rallying around something. And somebody quickly put together some sort of stay of, to halt the process and got it, into the court system and got it signed. and that put kind of a halt to the imminent danger. And then, of course, a much, much larger effort was gradually put together. A guy named Beecham Carr that I know was one of the rabble rousers in it. He's pretty old now, but they ended up, obviously saving the fox. But it was that close. It was like 5 high schoolers and a dog.
Wow.
Long that campaign was Save the Fox.
Oh, it was huge. Yeah, the Save the Fox campaign, it was a big deal. And my brother now, actually, he's not the head of it anymore, but he used to be the head of the board of the Atlanta Preservation Center, and they've saved countless buildings and stuff.
That's amazing.
In fact, the Margaret Mitchell house, we call it the Margaret Mitchell house. It was a house that she lived in. She was a roomer, but lived in it. It was a rooming house. It still exists on the corner of 10th and Peachtree.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I was one of the people that helped save that building. And then talking about churches, the adjacent across the highway from Piedmont Heights, there's Mason Baptist Church, which is a black church that was founded in the early part of the last century. It was ex-slaves who created a little village over there, and the church was formed, I say, in about 1920 or thereabouts, and it still exists. They still have services every Sunday morning. Nobody lives over there anymore. It's all, industrial and shops and business and whatnot. But that's a very historic area. Well, actually, the first church in what's now Atlanta was the Rock Spring Church. It started out as in a log cabin.
Wow.
And then they had a school. They started a school also in the church. And then they built a wooden church, a regular church. And then the current church, I think it was built around the turn of the last century. The church still exists, but the congregation dissolved about 6 or 8 ago, and the membership died off, and they sold the building, and it's now a Christian school.
Oh, wow.
And so they preserve the building, of course. It's on the historic register.
One of the things that they've come out with a little bit recently is the idea that tearing stuff down and then building a new mixed-use little fake downtown doesn't have the same character and charm. And it's okay, but there's something about the organic nature of things that were built up over time where you have different architectural styles. What they do now is they tear everything down and then they build this faux Main Street look. I mean, it's like
It looks like a set.
it looks like Disney World, kind of, where they just manufacture the look. And you don't mind at Disney World because that's what you're there for. But, yeah, it looks like a set. And it's why older neighborhoods have all this charm. They have different architectural styles, and not every house is exactly the same. You go into a modern subdivision, and they're literally just cookie cutter. And, I mean, you can get a measuring tape out. They're all like exactly 50 feet and 1 inch apart from each other, and they have the same number of bushes planted by the same landscaper. I mean, it's lame. And the density you have in smaller neighborhoods, it's a shame when older houses get torn down and a McMansion-like thing gets built there because A, they're ugly, and B, they're unsustainable. But I think we're doing better in that regard now. Developers are recognizing that, smaller is probably better.